And good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. I'm Henry Blas, Chief Content Officer of the Global Infrastructure Hub, and I'm delighted to be introducing this webinar today, hosted in partnership with Jacobs. So first, welcome and thank you for joining that launch presentation of a new US initiative, Improving Delivery Models. We're fortunate to have an impressive panel representing major infrastructure delivery agencies and policymakers for some of the largest transport projects in the world, including Grand Paris Express, Sydney Metro, and Toronto Metro Links. Before we dive into our topic, I'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce the Global Infrastructure Hub and our work. The GI Hub, as we call it, is a not-for-profit organization that advances the delivery of sustainable, resilient, and inclusive infrastructure. We are forwarded by the G20, and the GI Hub works collaboratively with the public and private sectors to produce data, insight, knowledge tools, and programs that inform policy and delivery, helping decision makers and practitioners create positive impact through infrastructure. So why did we create Improving Delivery Model tools? Infrastructure investment obviously plays a significant role in economic growth and is a critical part of the transition to a more sustainable and resilient world. When it comes to rethinking the finance and funding infrastructure, the GI Hub created last year a tool that identifies innovative solutions to structure bankable projects. And we actually currently hosting a series of similar webinars with the IFC that is going into the detail through and exploring some of those innovative solutions. Yet to achieve these outcomes, the public and private sectors need to rethink not only the funding and financing, but more broadly, how would they deliver infrastructure? Many of the challenges faced in delivering infrastructure can actually be traced back to the early processes of choosing the delivery model and structuring the project. So in consultation with G20 governments and in collaboration with Jacobs, the GI Hub created the tool, the Improving Delivery Model tools, to help practitioners, policymakers, and decision makers address this challenge and identify improvements prior to planning, design, and procurement of infrastructure projects. We believe that by showcasing evidence-based improvements in delivery models, we can change the way we deliver infrastructure, avoiding time and cost overruns and improving the quality of infrastructure. I would like to personally thank my team who've managed this initiative, and more specifically, Maud Devotibo, Director of Practical Tool and Knowledge, and Michael Tuacross, Senior Infrastructure Specialist. You will hear from them later on today. And now I would like to introduce Brian Harvey, is a Global VP Program Management at Jacobs, to share his opening remarks about improving delivery models.
Great,
Brian?
Thank you very much, Henry. And on behalf of Jacobs, I'd just like to thank, firstly, the GI Hub for the opportunity to be involved in the Improving Delivery Model initiative. Secondly, all of the many contributors to the initiative who've provided their insights, examples, case studies from around the world to produce such an informative tool. And finally, our panelists today for sharing their experience and perspective. Given the anticipated volume of infrastructure spend over the next 3 to 5 years, and obviously beyond that, it's essential that we maximize the benefits from this investment so as to decarbonize, stimulate inclusive and prosperous growth, and be more resilient to future shocks. At Jacobs, we work closely with infrastructure delivery authorities and agencies around the globe to plan, design, deliver infrastructure. And we appreciate how important the right delivery model is in achieving transformative outcomes. Needless to say, we will be active participants in this initiative well after this launch, and we would invite everyone attending this session today to do the same. We look forward to an ongoing, collaborative and robust debate to action the improvement in delivery models around the world. So with that, Henry, I'd like to pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Brian, and equally excited about the session just after that. So I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Michael Tuacross and Neil Chin. So Neil is the Jacobs team leader of Capital Project Advisory, and they will both provide you with a quick overview of Improving Delivery Model tool before we move to the speaker session. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Henry. And I'd just like to reiterate Henry's thanks to Jacobs on the initiative. It's been great working with them and look forward to working with them in the future. So next slide, thanks, Jordana. So the question of how to improve infrastructure delivery is not a new one. Infrastructure delivery has and always will be a challenge due to the complexities associated with its scale, the breadth in technologies and interfaces, and the intertwined expectations of government, industry, and community. At the core of it, this initiative attempts to address the question of how to improve infrastructure delivery in 4 ways. 1, by identifying and summarising the delivery challenges faced by governments and industry around the world. 2, collating and exemplifying improvements to these challenges in infrastructure delivery. 3, raising awareness on the importance of delivery strategies beyond just talking about the contractual model. And 4, sharing the key functional differences and suitability of the contractual models. Next slide, thanks. So we started working on this initiative with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic still unfolding. The GeoHub's previous research for the G20 has shown that infrastructure is an effective stimulus measure. And our recent InfoTracker product for the G20 as well has shown that there's been $3.2 trillion in infrastructure spending announcements by G20 countries since the start of the pandemic, further reaffirming the importance of infrastructure delivery in the ongoing challenges. However, our research has reaffirmed, as you would all be aware, that the challenges in infrastructure delivery haven't changed, and many have been or will be exacerbated by the pandemic. Despite the abundance of relevant and timely guidance out there, we identified that there was no globally collated source of improvements to address the challenges of delivering infrastructure. This is even more important now, given the stimulus response, but also the future fiscal constraints governments are likely to have, meaning we need every dollar to go further. To develop the initiative, as Brian's mentioned, we've spoken to a wide variety and array of stakeholders around the world. And I'd like to reiterate his thanks to all those who've provided their time and insights to help us develop the initiative, many of whom are on the call today. This global input has reaffirmed the global nature of the challenges in infrastructure. While specific jurisdictions and situational elements will make every project or program unique, many of the same underlying challenges remain. This initiative also complements our other tools and products, which Henry mentioned at the start, and references several of them within as resources to explore solutions with. I'd now like to hand to Neil to talk through the 4 key components of the initiative.
Welcome, and we're excited to see the combined efforts of the combined GeoHub and Jacobs teams culminate in the launch of the Improving Delivery Models initiative. I'd like to acknowledge in particular the Jacobs teams have consulted with numerous individuals, including project personnel, delivery agencies, contractors and investors, and helped to contribute to the content of the initiative. There were many expert partners consulted as part of the engagement, and they were all provided valuable insights from different jurisdictions that contribute to the content of the initiative and made it the final product we see here today. Next slide, please. The Improving Delivery Models initiative comprises of 4 elements. Firstly, a framework documenting the challenges and improvements identified through our research and consultation. These challenges are partly driven by the increasing complexity and scale of infrastructure projects and its impact on demand for specialist skills. Secondly, an associated set of case studies. These case studies identified within the framework against each improvement, highlighting how it has been employed. Thirdly, a key reference page documenting guidance materials of relevance. And lastly, a contractual model overview that provides a functional categorization of common major contractual models used across G20 countries. The framework structure is structured around 6 themes we've identified as universally relevant to infrastructure delivery. Capability and capacity to plan, deliver, operate, and maintain infrastructure. Cooperation, which is around partnering and collaborating to achieve shared outcomes. Efficiency, to plan and deliver in an optimal way. Finance, so identifying and securing it for infrastructure. Risk, understanding it, managing it, and allocating it appropriately. And finally, sustainability, the impacts of infrastructure on the environment, social value, and inclusive growth. 28 delivery challenges identified, which are spread across the 6 themes, with 61 improvements addressing these challenges. 67 case studies, 25 examples, and 11 resources are provided to illustrate these improvements. Next slide, please. This is a view of the tool with the 6 mentioned themes at the top that then cascade down to individual challenges through to the improvements in case studies. Next slide, please. The contractual models overview provides a functional categorization of common major contractual models used across G20 countries. In consultation with the World Bank, it provides a description of each model, including its variants or alternate names it may be referred to. It provides the characteristics of each model and denotes some of the more appropriate situations or scenarios they may be suited to. This part of the initiative is key as it aligns with the need to be contract agnostic. Every delivery model has a function and purpose, and all are valid options. Finally, the key references page documents materials of relevance to the infrastructure delivery process from governments and international organizations and complements this initiative. Next slide, please.
Great. Thanks, Neil, for running through that. Just go back, sorry. The improving infrastructure delivery initiative has been an interesting journey for us to develop over the past year. And as part of not only developing the initiative you can find on the website with the link put in the chat just before, we've also developed a introductory paper which looks to explore the key trends that we've observed in developing the initiative and some of the key messages conveyed through our research. We hope it provokes thought and a discussion on how delivery models can be improved, and you can find the full paper on the About the Tool section of the website. Next slide, thanks. So as part of the paper, we've developed or identified 8 global trends that feed all the challenges under the 6 themes in the IDM framework. Many such as evolving roles, cooperation, demand, and skills shortages are nothing new, just iterations of trends that have been around for some time. Others, such as outcomes and transition and digitalization, are more recent and relate to innovation in how public infrastructure is viewed by owners and the community. All are valid and all are global challenges in different forms. Next slide, thanks. From this and through the research we've done, we've identified broadly 8 key messages. We'll try to summarize all the framework information into 8 key messages as part of this initiative. These can be broadly classed, and we've classed them here under 3 topics, or pathways as we've called them in the paper. These being predictability with flexibility, managing uncertainty, and capabilities and innovation. Given our packed agenda, I won't read into all of these now, but key messages 2, 3, 4, and 6 on the screen there will form the basis of today's panel discussion. Of the 8, we can see that managing and mitigating risk, along with the need for proper planning and decision-making processes, are critical. Similarly, cooperation between parties are part of several of the messages. And the next slide shows some of the cooperation-related improvements and examples from the framework. So as we can see here, this is a snapshot of the cooperation page if you go to the framework on the website, and it's pulled out some of the improvements and related case studies and examples related to those challenges. In this instance, and for purposes of today, I guess the key point that we wanted to highlight is that the improvements in cooperation are not solely based on the contractual model selected. Industry briefings and market consultation are an effective form of cooperation, as seen on projects such as Sydney Metro, as is early contractor involvement, as seen on HS2. Co-location of project teams is also another improvement used to increase cooperation between multiple parties. I do encourage you to go and have a look at the initiative and the framework in more detail, and peruse the other challenges and case studies. And we do welcome any suggestions or further discussion around what is in the framework, and we look at it as something we're going to continue to improve on going forward. I'll now hand over to Maud and Brian again for the panel.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm delighted to be co-moderated the panel discussion with Brian Harvey. We have a fantastic lineup of guest speakers who I will now introduce. Benoît Dupuis, Executive Director, Procurement, Legal and Contract Management, Société du Grand Paris. Benoît has been advising leading companies in the energy, water and infrastructure industry, with a particular focus on the delivery of major infrastructure projects around the world. The Grand Paris Express is a landmark project that will add 200 kilometers of fully automated metro rail to the existing Paris Metro network. So the second panelist is Angela Jeffrey, Project Director, Sydney Metro, Western Sydney Airport. With a background in construction management, Angela has delivered a range of major health projects across Sydney and regional New South Wales. Angela is currently responsible for the delivery and construction of a multi-billion metro line connecting travelers to the new Western Sydney International Airport. Charles van Niekerk, the third panelist, Executive Vice President, Transit, Infrastructure Ontario. With a background of civil engineering, Charles has worked in public and private roles in both South Africa and Canada. Charles leads Infrastructure Ontario's project delivery team, executing the Province of Ontario Transit project in partnership with Metrolinx. These include commuter rail, subway, and light rail transit projects worth over $60 billion. The fourth panelist is Dejan Markovic, Procurement Strategy Lead at OECD Public Governance Directorate. Prior to joining OECD in 2014, Dejan worked in the private sector for 10 years, specializing in infrastructure and economic regulation. At the International Transport Forum, he led and published major reports on infrastructure governance, procurement, and private investment, and will release shortly a new evidence tool informing the procurement strategy for major infra projects. Our fifth panelist is Matthew Vickerstraw, Deputy CEO and Director of Finance, Infrastructure and Project Authority, the United Kingdom. Prior to joining IPA in 2016, Matthew worked in investment banking for 25 years with experience of working in infrastructure across multiple sectors and other structured finance areas, including project finance, real estate, assets, and export financing. So the panel discussion today will cover two major topics. The first one will be packaging and procurement strategies, and the second one will be around the contractual model with diagnostic approach of a contractual model and more collaborative approach. So let me start with you, Angela, with this first question. The Western Sydney Airport line will be the third line of the Sydney Metro network. What are the lessons learned from the first metro lines and how that can be applied in the decision-making process? Thank you.
Thank you, Maud. There are many benefits of being the third project in a broader program of works, and obviously being able to adopt lessons learnt is one of those key benefits. The Western Sydney Airport project is very much similar in scale and size and complexity to our Northwest project, which is in operations, and over the past 2 years that it has been in operations has scored almost close to 100% in customer satisfaction. So a great testament to its success. In adopting lessons learnt from the Northwest project on the Western Sydney Airport project, we did consider two key facets. One being the importance of having a competitive market, responding to the tender process for our procurement and delivery strategy. And the other key lesson was addressing the best way to to procure the complexity of significant interfaces across the 23 kilometres of rail that I'm delivering. So with the want of generating a competitive market and the want to manage the complexity of the project, we engage with a significant piece of market sounding and interactive market engagement processes through the EOI phase and through the tender phase proper. In some instances for our packages, we found that having 2 tenderers was sufficient to generate a competitive market and has led to really great results. But with regards to our most complex and largest package being our PPP, that's delivering all of the line-wide services, our trains, our systems, we have wanted to keep that package whole. We haven't wanted to split that scope. And the market response and interest in that package has adjusted. So over time, we've tried to engage with the market to understand their risk appetite. We've adjusted our commercial principles to respond to some of the feedback that we've received, and that's been really led from our Chief Executive, Peter Regan, down through my team. And I'm really pleased to say that as a result of that significant interactive market engagement process, we've concluded our expression of interest phase, and we've had really strong responses from the market, and we have a great appetite for industry to participate in the project, making sure that we've delivered on our 2 key vision items: 1, keeping the scope as whole as possible, and 2, generating a really strong and competitive competition for this last and major package.
Thank you very much, Angela. Now I'm turning to Benoit with this question. Société du Grand Paris have overseen an evolution in how the project is being procured from traditional procurement to design and build contracts. Can you explain how Société du Grand Paris approach to procurement has changed since the program began and why? Thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. Well, as you all know, the scale of the procurement issues is proportional to the scale of a project, and so for us it is huge. So to answer with a few words about Grand Paris Express and Société du Grand Paris, because these are 2 different things. Grand Paris Express is the name of a project, and Société du Grand Paris is the name of a project company. So Société du Grand Paris is a very special purpose company, which is 100% owned by the state, dedicated to the design, construction, and delivery of the Grand Paris Express metro project, which, as you introduced, is consists in 200 kilometers of new metro lines, which is doubling the existing network, basically, with 68 new stations and also real estate development around the new stations.
We have a sound problem. Is that back? Okay, so I think we'll continue and have Benoit back as soon as his connection is back. So let me go to the next speaker. Thank you, Benoit, and we'll come back to you after. From Paris to Toronto, and the complex and multi-dimension transit system operated by Metrolinx in Greater Toronto and the Hamilton region. Important here to mention that Infrastructure Ontario is the procuring and delivering agency for the largest transit project. Charles, could you tell us more about the market consultation and the engagement with the private sector? Angela mentioned before that in Sydney, this market consultation and engagement was really important. When do you introduce a market consultation? How important is it to develop the procurement and packaging strategy?
Thanks, Maud, certainly, and good morning, everybody from Toronto. The short answer is we do market consultation as soon as possible in the process and as often as we can. Now, saying that, it is very resource intensive for both us and the market, especially now that we are trying to manage a lot of change. So we often use more informal phone calls just to our regular participants, but also very formal processes with information sessions, workshops, questionnaires, etc. And on some of our larger projects, those workshops are global. So on one of our projects, the Metrolinx on Corridor Go expansion project, we actually traveled to Europe and the East to actually go speak to contractors in those countries to attract them to Toronto, because we simply do not have all the resources we need to deliver the program we have. We also make a lot of use of consultants to do market research on our behalf, and we focus on 4 main areas. Now, firstly, as Angela already stated, the construction market is extremely busy at the moment, and we are always concerned with market capacity and the ability to attract teams to maintain competitive tension. So that is very important for us. To manage this, we try and offer a wide range of project sizes, delivery models, so that we can access as much of the market as possible, to try and stop to fill that gap, and also to attract new players from the international market. So we therefore use market consultation very early on in the planning process to help us with packaging strategies. Firstly, to get the market excited about the work, to inform them. We do have our market updates. We do quarterly, just to tell the market of the projects that's upcoming, that's in planning and procurement phase. But we also use these sessions to tell them more about the projects so they can get excited about it. We then discuss bundling strategies, especially with the view of properly managed interface risk. I think we are all aware, especially on transit jobs, it doesn't help we just break up all the projects and then sit with all the interface risk between those bundles. We look at the value ranges. Our projects ranges anything from 100 million to over 13 billion in capital per project or per procurement. So we also have to try and match up the project sizes to the capabilities of the contractors, especially considering what securities they are able to provide to secure their performance. Then we look at the type of scope, which comes back to the whole interface question that we include per bundle, and the delivery models to consider. Secondly, our mandate has expanded dramatically over the past few years. IO started delivering hospitals, and we are very proud of our fixed price P3 models that has been very successful in the country. But we are also now expanding the delivery models we are using, considering just the wide range of asset classes we are delivering projects on, from municipal services, broadband, highways, and our very large transit portfolio. These projects all have a very different risk profile, and our projects are generally becoming much larger and more complex. So we therefore use market soundings when developing procurement and contract documents to help us adapt our documents to specific asset classes, to sculpt the risk profiles per asset classes and the processes, etc. we do use. Thirdly, we've all seen the impact of COVID and the volatility in the supply chain that's created. Now, that's a very bad combination considering all of the work everybody's doing. And I think somebody earlier in the discussion mentioned how infrastructure delivery is used as an economic boost. And we can drastically see the increase of work. So we also find that our contractors have, in some cases, underestimated risk transfer on P3 projects and are becoming much more risk averse. So we are trying to adapt by using a wider range of delivery models in addition to our typical fixed price P3s, and have recently started using a range of progressive models. So for us, market consultation is very, very important. To develop these models, ensure the risk transfer under each is reasonable, the processes are understood, and that we can implement these successfully. So we are just at the end of the development phase of our first alliance, and we're currently in procurement on 5 different progressive delivery models. In our social side, that will lead to more fixed price contracts again. On our transit side, more to your target price type models. And then finally, in general, we like to continue with as much market engagement during the specific procurement process on a specific project. And we make extensive use of commercially confidential meetings to get market input and adapt our documents and process in flight to achieve the best outcomes by the time we get the submissions. Of course, while trying to keep the process fair and transparent.
Thank you, Charles. That was very comprehensive. And we will talk a bit more about the contractual model also on the second half of the discussion. Now I'm turning now to the policy angle. And thanks, Diane, for your time given the OECD Public Procurement and Infrastructure Governance Week in Paris. In the European Union Compendium of Large Infrastructure Projects published in 2020, one of the policy recommendations is to recognize that the procurement strategy and the selected procurement procedure play a key role in the design and development of the overall delivery strategy for a project, specifically in connecting the front-end development stage with the delivery stage. What are your thoughts about this?
Thank you, Maud, and thanks to everybody for the comments provided so far. What the Compendium of the European Union has identified is essentially that right now there is a misconception what is meant with the term procurement strategy. And even now when, let's say, commentators are talking about procurement strategy, they essentially mean the choice of the delivery model. But what should be considered in a broader sense in the procurement strategy are all key decisions that lead to success or failure of the procurement. And we have heard some of those mentioned before, but essentially what happens is the first thing we need to ask ourselves is what is the project that we are procuring? The second thing that follows from that is what are the capabilities of the organization that will be procuring the projects that are needed. That's the make or buy question. Right after that, we enter into the question of contract scoping. So which contract is too big, which contract is too small, where should be the boundaries between those contracts? And only after that, we can start discussing what should be the nature of that each particular bundle. Should the contract have a delivery model A? Should it have a B? Should it be competitive? Should it be collaborative? And what should be the incentives in those delivery models? And right now, the perception is that this process is upside down. So that the public decision makers first establish the procuring entities. Usually they prefer lean organization with an agile structure. That means that you don't have too much in-house capabilities. You have to outsource as much as possible. And that means you're procuring large scopes and transferring as much responsibility to the private sector. Essentially though, in most infrastructure portfolios, no portfolio consists only of super heavy, super difficult project scopes. There is a lot of variety even within individual projects in terms of what activities are involved in terms of uncertainty or complexity. So it would be a mistake to apply a one-size-fits-all project allocation or delivery model to large scopes. You need to move the process of analysis to a lower level, to a level of activities, and to find out what is the nature of your project before you start discussing what should be your procurement strategy.
Thank you, Diane. I see that Benoit joined. Yeah, Benoit. Yes. So maybe I'm coming back to you to finalize on your answer and question on the delivery model that are used by the Société du Grand Paris. You're on mute. We will unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. Sorry for the technical issue. So I was explaining that the procurement issue was at the scale of a project that unfortunately PPP scheme was not available for us, and that we took the opinion that externalizing the financing was not a sound choice for us. So we managed our procurement within our legal constraint, which was a loi MOP, with three parties: the owner, the owner's engineer, and the contractors. The result of this is that we have an extensive number of contracts and huge interface risks, which is retained by the granting authorities. Plus, we have inefficiencies in contract monitoring due to the number of contracts. So this is the reason why in 2019, we decided to shift towards more global contracts in the form of design and build. So we made a slight adjustment to the enabling law of Société du Grand Paris to secure, at least from a legal basis, the use of design and build model. And our objective through this shift in the delivery model was a single procedure, or not exactly a single procedure, but at least a single contract for most of our contracts were aligned with a single point of responsibility for the delivery. This solves the issue of internal interfaces, especially between the designer and the contractors. So now we have 4 major procedures underway of design and build contracts. Our new challenge is, due to the size of those contracts, there are very few players which are capable of handling such massive and complex contracts with an in-depth knowledge of the French regulation and other public actors. But that's mainly the shift that Société du Grand Paris has decided from traditional procurement to design and build. Sorry for the interruption once again.
Thank you, Benoit. So I'm back now to Matthew. And last but not least, I know, Matthew, you have a very busy agenda for IPA UK lately. With the COP26 around the corner, it's interesting to note the role of infrastructure in decarbonization and net zero 2050. This is highlighted in your recent Transforming Infrastructure Performance 2030 roadmap. What is the role of procurement and how can we improve decision-making to address these goals?
Thank you, Maud. Firstly, you're right. The UK has a highly ambitious national infrastructure strategy, really post-COVID, to build back better, greener and faster. And one thing that we do in the IPA is we prepare annually our construction pipeline. And over the next 10 years, we have a construction pipeline of £650 billion. And so I'm just, as I've heard my fellow colleagues on the panel, the kind of market constraints and, you know, the ability of the supply chain, construction markets, etc., to respond to that are actually equally important for us. But our Transforming Infrastructure Performance 2030 roadmap, so TIP 2030, I just kind of like to take us back, because what that focuses on is, you know, a really relentless focus on citizen outcomes. So I think there's actually a step before we procure to focus on what are the outcomes that we want to achieve, even before we think about procurement strategies, our markets, how we're responding to that. Because if we can define the outcomes that we want for our citizens, then actually we should be designing our procurement strategies and our delivery solutions in order to have an alignment of interests around achieving those outcomes. So, you know, the kind of things and themes I've heard, the project selection, the kind of innovation, improving performance of our supply chain, building capability for TIP 2030, modern methods of construction, using digital twins, making sure that, you know, people in the kind of on-site have more time on tools rather than poor project management leading to actually waste and materials being wasted. All of those things, TIP 2030, that's what it's all about. But for us in the UK, because we were really one of the first economies to commit to net zero 2050, and obviously just before COP26, we're highly focused on net zero 2050. And it is the case that throughout all of our infrastructure procurement, we are building in our thought processes. What materials, you know, concrete, steel, what logistics in terms of an amount of diesel, red diesel spent by contractors, what waste, as I said, what modern methods of construction, so off-site construction methodologies, making sure from a environmental but also social governance perspective, perhaps work sites are more attractive for workers. We get more gender balance. We actually get another generation of construction workers coming into our industries. But certainly for net zero 2050 as well, how do we measure, how do we monitor not just the concrete and steel that goes into our infrastructure projects, but the whole life carbon footprint. So going into the operational phase of our projects. I wish I could say that we had all the solutions and all the answers at the moment. We don't. And that's why these kind of initiatives, sharing cross countries, across the world, improving efficiency, improving the way we're managing our carbon footprint, are to me really important, because not just net zero, but digital, how, you know, clinical patient pathways happen for our patients in our hospitals, how from a transportation point of view we reduce carbon footprints of travel, for us are absolutely critical as we think about the future. And this is all about thinking about the future in terms of infrastructure provision. So Maud, those are my thoughts. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And I just take the opportunity to mention that the Global Infrastructure Hub has been published a circular economy paper, thinking on those very important issues, as well as we release a transformative infrastructure outcome very soon, because yes, that's definitely the more important question right now. Back to you, Brian, for the second part of this panel discussion.
Great, thanks, Maud. And as we've been talking in the first session, there are lots of discussions around delivery models and contract models. So we'll build on that now. And if I can go first to Angela. Sydney Metro, as you rightly highlighted, are using several different contract models, different approaches to delivery, D&C, PPP, delivery partner, etc. What are some of the key drivers that allow you to take such an approach to contracting? Thanks.
Brian, so we start off by assessing the best delivery strategy. So what is the best packaging strategy to deliver, mega projects of multi-billion dollars worth of infrastructure on our individual metros? Once we've determined those best delivery and packaging solutions, we then overlay the procurement. I did mention previously that the want for continuing to have a competitive market and a real competition in the procurement of our individual packages. So that obviously is consistent with the question you've asked. I think building depth within our own internal Sydney Metro team to ensure that we've got capacity and capability and know-how to administer various different procurement models is really, really quite important, and ensuring that obviously that as we're engaging with the market, that we are tailoring those different procurement solutions, one, to deliver value for money outcomes, but I think also picking up what Matthew was earlier saying, that they're very, very mindful of ensuring that from a customer perspective, particularly with our PPPs, that there's a whole of life assessment and a delivery of the customer requirements being considered very, very early up front in those different procurement suites.
Great, thanks very much indeed. And Charles, you've mentioned again some of those different contract forms you're using. Very similar again to the Sydney Metro examples that Angela just raised there. Do you have similar drivers to Sydney Metro and similar outcomes that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, of course, very similar to what Angela stated. There is a big focus on market capacity and making sure that the resources we have the required skills to actually manage the projects using the specific delivery model we have. I mean, I think it's a big issue. People think delivery models is a silver bullet to get a successful project, but it's actually more about the people. And do your people have the skill sets, and do your contractors understand the models? Now, for us, it's first and foremost about driving value. As stated by Matthew, it's key to understand the desired outcomes we're trying to achieve. And we use that to define what the value is we're trying to achieve. Now, value is not just about the best price or delivering the project within budget or delivering it on time to unlock the benefits. But we want to have the best technical solution and commercial mechanisms to drive that desired benefit. So in each case, we would use the model that can best drive the right level of innovation and problem solving. Now, in projects where scope and potential delivery means and methods is properly understood by the contractors and they can independently innovate, then we always lean towards our fixed price models and getting committed bids under competitive tension. Now, if there's greater value in jointly optimizing the solution and better manage risk outside of the confines of a procurement process, as we all know, they can be very restrictive in terms of what you can engage on with the proponents. And then we lean more towards our progressive models where we have a development phase to first finalize the scope, schedule, and price and optimize risk transfer. And hopefully try and avoid some of those risks before we actually go into construction. We also want to get a reasonable risk transfer that we can for the price, for the prices we get at good value. So we pick a model where the specific risk profile of the project, we can maximize the risk transfer. So we try to get the right mix of performance incentives to drive behavior, but also to be reasonable risk transfer. Our preference is typically, again, the fixed price contracts, but we always have a risk profile on projects that require a much greater extent of shared risk. And then we lean towards the target pricing models. Finally, we want to ensure collaboration throughout the process. Now, I'm the very first person to state I do not believe delivery models drive collaboration. I think that was one of the questions as well on Slido. But I do believe that when you use a delivery model correctly, it can be a catalyst for improved collaboration. For me, it's much more about the behavior of people and the culture in the group. And sadly, we often see that teams try and implement a new delivery model to boost collaboration, but they don't actually work on the culture and behavior of people, and then it's actually a disaster. So our choice is very much also informed by the level of collaboration that we are looking for, the capabilities of our staff, and how we can then move the projects forward.
Great, thanks very much, Charles. So building on, move now on to Dejan and the report that you directed with Kennedy and others in 2018, looking at risk pricing in infrastructure, and just touching on what Charles has just raised there. You explored some of the solutions that make infrastructure projects less costly by reducing the uncertainty during procurement. Can you tell us a little bit more about the critical role that design maturity has with that objective in mind? Dejan.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So before we talked about the steps needed in a, let's say, holistic procurement strategy, and most people will be unaware that there's quite a bit of evidence available out there how to improve your decision making. For example, the bidder selection phase, most people will not know that that's actually based on something called auction theory in economics, whereas all the other phases, like delivery model selection that we were talking about before, is still very much left to subjective decision making. So in terms of uncertainty during the bidder selection stage and design maturity, there is evidence available that shows that, for example, bundled delivery models such as design and build and EPC, while they reduce risks from interfaces by bundling these two phases, they also increase the uncertainty that the bidders face during the bidding stage. For example, the time to what the bidding stage of these delivery models expects is that the bidders will achieve a stage where finalized detailed design is developed. But in reality, that's often not the case because the time is limited, because they can lose the bidding process and not recover their money. And so they will always leave some portion of the design unfinished, also to give themselves freedom exposed in terms of the solutions. And that will require them to not be able, that will lead them to not be fully able to efficiently price the design that they have. And not having an information about the detailed design leads to increased contingencies and efficient pricing. And so in the end, you can have a project that is on time, is on budget, but is super expensive. And that's also inefficient, because at the beginning, we were just talking about cost overruns. It's important to realize that you can have on time and on budget delivery and still be super expensive. Now, this point that I just mentioned and all the other phases are included in a evidence-based process that we developed with the help of Queensland University of Technology and have branded it at the OECD as STEPS. It's support tool for effective procurement strategy. And this is essentially what we would advise procuring entities of major infrastructure projects should be using in the future. Great, thanks, Ian. Benoit, the Paris Metro's got I understand, an internal system to assess cost estimation of very large projects, and I think it's quite a rigorous process. Could you explain a little bit how this works and how it helps you reduce the uncertainty in cost estimation?
Yes, of course. Maybe there are three seasons to a story. The first one is the legacy, because like many flagship projects, the initial cost assessment of Grand Paris Express and also the initial delivery schedule was politically driven with a focus on global acceptability of the project. Therefore, the initial budget with a cost assessment of 22.6 billion euros in 2013, as well as the initial schedule, was not reflecting the magnitude and complexity of the project. I would like to just remind that the assessment of a various contract to be procured is part of the scope and liability of the owner's engineer in our traditional procurement scheme, and the owner's engineers themselves have also underestimated the complexity and costs of a project. So we were quickly faced to the reality with cost overruns and delays in delivery, which appeared progressively with purchase price higher than estimates, and in addition to this, cost overrun throughout execution. And we received, like many granting authorities, a high number of claims for time extension, increasing cost, which are processed and discussed with the various contractors. I'm not surprised because I used to work on the other side of the table, so it's not a surprise to me. What we do and how we react to monitor the cost and the budget is a regular and periodical reassessment of the project costs, line by line and contract by contract, on the basis of course, the cost overruns which have already been incurred, the part of contingencies which is already eaten, and all of this during procurement and execution stages. And of course, the look forward estimates are reassessed on a regular basis when we use very complex mathematical risk assessment formulas, which I will not develop here. We recently introduced a concept of a target cost, but it's not exactly the same concept as our UK colleagues, including the contingency, which is an approach with an ambitious target beneath estimates, but including contingencies at project line level and also at contract levels. And we monitor very closely the variations between the reality and the target. What we do in addition is we systematically reassess internally the contract estimates of our owners, engineers, as well as our contractors when we are facing claims. And also the last element of the chain is a strong pressure on the management of Société du Grand Paris from top to down to remain within budget. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone.
Great, thank you very much, Benoit. We've just got a short period of time left now for Q&A, so we're going to try and draw in a few questions from the Slido now. First, the question last question from me for Matthew. If we looked at the collaboration, and this word's now becoming an industry norm. I mentioned it through many times through the session today. Be useful to get your perspective. Is it the contractual alliance partnerships that make the difference? Is it a mindset thing that makes the difference? We should be really interested to get your perspective on it. Thanks, Matthew.
I think Ari, I mean, listen, I echo some of the panelists. So in our construction playbook, we have a delivery model assessment methodology. We do all of the reference class forecasting on risk and optimism bias, etc. To me, there are really three things. Okay, one is culture. So actually, when you get into delivering large, complicated projects, and obviously we have Crossrail HS2 experience, you need to get the culture right. You know, that comes back to the alignment around the outcomes. So you need an alignment of interest. So, and if you don't get that culture right, then really projects go off the beam. I think it's really critical to be an intelligent client. So again, coming back to the outcomes, actually having the right capability within government, whether, you know, municipal, central, you need to be an intelligent client and actually understand what you want and how you're contracting. I look at, you know, my background is senior debt provider or equity investor. It's all about risk, and absolutely this is all about risk. But actually, if we come back to outcomes, then yes, we should look perhaps at design delivery partner models, which is a kind of almost an extension of alliancing and not even target price. Because then actually in developing the design, you can come back to trying to get that alignment of interests around getting the outcomes that you want. So to the point, you can have a wonderful target price model, which is extremely costly and doesn't give you the outcomes that you want if you're not focusing around that client culture and the relationship with the contractors, and also making sure that you, as an intelligent client, you're getting what you want for the outcomes that you've specified up front. So I think that's what we're really trying to work on, because we kind of see the market is struggling with fixed price design globally, that contractors aren't able to deal with the complexity of the projects that we have. Target price doesn't necessarily work. So actually alliancing DDP type models drives the right collaboration around those key things of getting the outcomes that you want and creating the right culture. So those really would be my thoughts. Back to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Matthew. And with that, Maud, I think I'm passing back to you to try and deal with a few, or at least one sided question. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a bit complicated because I have a lot of questions here. So there is just one question, and I will just bounce back on something that you said before. So Matthew, about the modelization or the standardization, or how to have more lean processes for those large projects. So I don't know if one of the panelists want to react on this question from one of the participants. What role do you think building information modeling and design standardization play in improving infrastructure delivery? Any of the panelists?
I mean, I'm happy to jump right in. I mean, data, I think, is going to be critical for infrastructure delivery moving forward, more than we're doing at the moment. And certainly benchmarking and cost information, doing the front end loading around benchmarking, what it might cost type analysis is, again, absolutely critical. And then feeding back the data, that benchmarking material into your processes and having feedback loops to learn and benefit from that learning. Absolutely agree, critical.
Can I add something to that? Yes. So I agree with Matthew. It is critical to have the right numbers, inputs when making estimates and going through the process. But you have to consider that point, building information management as a infrastructure of the procurement process. It is peripheral to the question, how do you procure, but you absolutely need it. Right.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions, but we are now at the time. So I just want to thank very much all the panelists for joining us today. A recording of this session will be available on the website in the next few days. So I just want to thank you a lot for that. And we might circulate some of the question also, and to answer to the question separately. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.